So this is episode 3 of Just Jody Chats, and today we're chatting about a very sensitive issue, and that is gender-based violence in South Africa. And my guest is the activist Melene Rossouw. Melene, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me on your show, Jody. You know that I'm a big fan of yours, so indeed a massive privilege to be on your platform today, talking about a very important topic.
Yeah, I agree, and that's the reason why I invited you. When I open my social media, I read the newspapers, I watch TV, I listen to radio, and every damn day, gender-based violence, violence against women and children dominate the headlines. Why do you think gender-based violence is so prevalent in South Africa?
Jody, gender-based violence has always been prevalent in South Africa, and that is something that a lot of people do not realize. Gender-based violence has always been the crime of secrecy, because obviously in domestic violence situations or molestations or sexual violations within the family, the victim was always meant to feel as if they were in fact the perpetrator, and that everything that happened to them was in fact their fault. And so obviously no one would lay a charge against the perpetrator because they would know the perpetrator. And it was this sort of secrecy that dominated the space until a few years when a few women said enough is enough. We started seeing mass protests, not only in South Africa, but across the world. We've seen a lot of activism around women's rights and violence against women rising also across the world. And South Africa obviously playing their part too. And obviously with the role of the media being a bit more robust, because the internet has helped. A lot of people has now reached out to the internet to come and talk about their stories or to report on stories, which wasn't there before. And so obviously we feel as if gender-based violence has been something that existed for the last 5 to 10 years, when in fact it has been there forever. But because of the internet and because of media, people like yourself, that is making gender-based violence a topic and really putting it out there, that is why we know more about it. But I'm going to tell you a secret. These statistics that we quote in the media, in our articles, etc., is the tip of the iceberg. There are many cases of gender-based violence that is not reported. There are still women who do not have the confidence to go and report a case at the police.
Why?
You know? Okay, so I mean, dealing with the police is another kettle of fish, because I mean, I've had my personal dealings with them when I practice law, and very recently. I think the work of activism has really exposed me to a lot, because you can't advocate on behalf of something if you haven't experienced some form of violations yourself. And I'm going to tell you about an incident first, but let's talk about the law that governs the space. I always say if overkill was a person, South African law would be that. We have enough laws. Just very recently, my organization, together with 2 other organizations, we submitted inputs on the new domestic violence amendment bill. To tighten some areas up, etc. There was also another piece of legislation where they said, should the punishment be harsher? We gave inputs on that kind of laws as well. But the problem is not the law. The problem is the implementation and the application of the law by those who are supposed to do it. And those are the police and the court officials. Now, I'm going to tell you something that happened very briefly in the week when I helped a victim. So last week, I was asked by a friend of mine to help a victim of domestic violence. I went to Lansdowne police station with this lady, and as you approach the police officer to ask them if they can assist, with humility, with this case. This is a sensitive case. Her husband is a stalker. Both of us are very scared because I don't know her husband. I just know her. The police officer's attitude was merely, listen here, I don't care. And in fact, this is not even the right place to be. You should be at Wynberg Court. Take your victim, go to Wynberg Court. So obviously I get very frustrated because of my legal background. I know that if anything happens to us now, they're not going to take responsibility for it. They didn't offer us once whether or not a female could come and assist the victim. He didn't. I asked him if there was a van that could maybe drive with us to the Wynberg Court, because I was really scared that her husband was busy following us. He said no. Then I asked him, can I make an affidavit here in this police station to say that I was here at 12 o'clock or 11 o'clock and that you refused to help us? And obviously, he blew a gasket. He didn't want to help. We went to Wynberg Court, and this is the second phase of our trauma. We were met there with a court clerk from hell. She was so absolutely rude because the one lady that was sitting next to me said, there's one clerk that is just very mean. She's just been mean to everyone the entire morning. After 30 minutes, she calls me in. So for the first time in my life, because remember when I practiced law, I used to only see the protection, the interim protection order, and my job was to represent women to get the final order of protection. I didn't go through all the phases that they had to go through. It's an horrific experience. There's no sensitivity. She calls me in 30 minutes later after we've arrived, and she asked me a question that I've never been asked before. And she asked me, why did you and your victim arrive here at 12 o'clock for a protection order? Because if your victim was really in danger, she would have been here at 9 o'clock in the morning. And so I told her, do you judge every single woman that comes in here by the time they arrive at the court to determine the gravity of the case? And she replied, yes. So Jody, this is the kind of people. I mean, that's the short version of the day of hell that we had. This is the kind of people that we are entrusting with the lives of women that come there in desperation for them to help them. They do not help. They do not assist with the protection orders. And even if the women get protection orders, if they call up, or they would rather have, I don't know when they got the mediation status of mediating between two parties, but they would rather have these two parties mediate. I believe that many lives that has been lost in South Africa was due to the negligence, the gross negligence by the police. But I'm going to tell you what their silver bullet is. They're always going to argue resources. So just because of that, I started a group on Facebook, and I want a lot of people to join that group. It's called Protection Order Nightmares South Africa. And I did that in response to what happened to me. And suddenly a whole lot of stories came forth from women saying, this happened to me at Worcester police station. This happened to me at Khayelitsha, at Bellville police station, Manenberg police station. And the point is, we are going to draw up a petition. And that petition is going to go straight to Parliament. It's going to go straight to the police ministry and the Department of Justice. Because you see, they always like to have these blanket statements where they say, we know the courts are a problem, and we know that the police stations are a problem. Now we're telling them exactly which police stations our people have issues with. And we want you to invest directly into those police stations. I mean, I don't even want to talk about the shelter. I mean, I don't operate in the shelter space, but I have a lot of comrades and people and activists that works within the shelter space. There's no funding for shelters. And even if there's the bare minimum to establish a shelter, there's not enough money for operations. They can't afford to have more than, let's say, 500 women there at the time. Because obviously the women come sometimes with the children, they have to feed them, they have to do all sorts of services, that is offered to them. It's not sustainable. In provinces like Mpumalanga, for example, there's no shelter. And I mean, gender-based violence statistics clearly shows that there's a massive issue with gender-based violence in that province too. At least to a large extent, the Western Cape has been progressive because there are more shelters within the Western Cape, and there's been quite a bit more that is starting to open up. But let's be honest, Jody, how many shelters do we need until the issue of gender-based violence is eradicated? Because we don't want women in shelters, do we? We want them to be empowered. We want them to have their own homes. We want them to rebuild their lives and become contributing members of society, And so for me, I always also have a challenge with the fact that we focus a lot on, obviously ensuring that the support structures are there. But what happens after 6 weeks? I mean, you can't stay in the shelter forever. What will happen to you after then? Many of them do not have jobs. Where are you going to stay? Are you going to stay with a family, with friends? Do you have a job? Are you economically empowered? Do you have any form of qualifications? Are we even looking at those issues? And so I think also to a large extent, those kind of empowerment programs must be worked into the curriculum or the services offered in those shelters. And a lot of organizations, even like the one that I have, the Women Lead Movement, although our focus is predominantly on prevention, because we don't want to get to that point, I also believe in the empowerment of that woman there. Because we go into the schools and we go into communities, and many times women do not necessarily open up. They might be part of the session, but they won't open up about their own abuse. But our intention is to educate them about not only gender-based violence and gender inequality and all these ugly things, but to also educate them about economic empowerment, how to start your own business, how to become independent. I genuinely believe that that is going to be the way out for many of these women.
Sounds like a daunting task. And obviously a lot of women are also dependent on the abusers sometimes, for whether it be a house, whether it be for money, whether it be for food, security for children.
Exactly. I mean, I'm currently dealing with a case exactly like that. I mean, this woman has been abused for many years. She can't leave. She has a child that is mentally disabled. She's staying in a rural community. The husband often tends to lock her up and lock the children up in the home. The police officers are not assisting her. In fact, they don't even care about her case anymore, because she says that he's so vindictive. In fact, she calls him a narcissist, that as soon as she lays a complaint against him, an hour later, he will lay a complaint against her. And so automatically the police will be like, oh, yeah, these two are just playing each other up against, playing each other up. They should deal with their own domestic issues on their own.
Sure. Sounds hectic. You said in the beginning of this conversation that it's underreported. So what would your advice be to women in an abusive relationship who doesn't know which way to go to report it, because she's dependent on the partner, on the husband, rather keeps quiet, who keeps on a happy face, just to, because the community and the family will judge her? What's your advice to a woman in that situation?
Jody, the first thing I would want to do is work in communities like that. I think the more information women have, and that has always been our downfall in various aspects in society, is the lack of education, the lack of knowledge about particular things. When we do our education, for example, a lot of women didn't actually realize that they were that they were part of gender-based violence, or that they were victims of gender-based violence, because of their understanding of what it is. I think a lot of women do not know that they are being violated, or that gender-based violence is being perpetrated against them. And a penny drops when you realize that you are in fact a victim of gender-based violence. I've seen it with young girls, because we also do this education with young people as well. And this young girl writes me a letter, and she says to me, she didn't want to speak in the session, and she's from Duiselsdorp. But she never realized that she was a victim of gender-based violence. But for a woman in an abuse situation, it is important to have a support structure. And many women feel and believe that they do not have the support structure. But you do have a friend, and you do have family that is willing to help you. So it's really a matter of reaching out. There's no reason for you to feel embarrassed. Nothing that has happened to you and to your children was your fault. It has never been your fault. And I want to tell them also that there is an opportunity for them, and that there are organizations and people out there that will support them, that will ensure that they get back on their feet again, and that they can face life again for their children. Because the longer they stay also, especially if they have children, and I've seen this growing up, children that grows up in abusive households tend to become abusers themselves. And if it's girls, they tend to become victims of abuse, because they've seen this their entire life. We cannot allow the cycle of violence in our communities and in our families to perpetuate. If you don't feel comfortable reaching out to your friends or to your family, there are shelters that you can contact. And you can also contact the GBV hotline, which I actually wrote the number down. I get a goldfish memory, so I'll just mention it. So the GBV hotline for women that really wants to report case like that, or just receive general advice, is 0800 428 428. 0800 428 428. So if you don't feel comfortable speaking to someone at your church or your friends or your family, reach out to this hotline and they will give you the necessary advice. But you need to get out, because your life and your children's life should take first place.
A lot of the time, or most of the time, the perpetrator is somebody known to the family. It's a man. And then you get the debate, but not all men. But this is something I've had to think about hard. You know, am I, even though I might not be abusing my partner or my sister or whoever, am I part of the problem? How do we address that?
Jody, there's a lot in their placards, but I still feel that their silence around this issue is deafening. I feel that they have agency and they have power and they have influence to have tough discussions with their friends, to have tough discussions with other men and boys. There's no reason for Jody Hendricks not to start his own program to empower boys, you know, to show them what a real man is and that a real man do not abuse women. I feel insulted by men who still associates themselves with abusers, because all of us know an abuser. In my community where I grew up in Bellville South, there was abusers everywhere. I mean, there was pedophiles everywhere, you know, but no one said anything. And there's a quote that I love by Martin Luther King where it says, there's a time when silence becomes betrayal. So the fact that you are saying, I'm not an abuser, it's not me, all men are not trash, what are you doing to solve the problem, you know, and address? You don't want to cause, you know, issues in your friendship, and so therefore you don't say anything. You are complicit in the abuse of that woman, you know. And it's not only men, Jody, there are women. You know, a colleague of mine in one of the movements, I won't mention it, they call them patriarchy princesses, where they cover up for men that abuse women, where they actually say that in 2020, that the woman is the reason why they are being abused. We cannot have that. We will never eradicate gender-based violence within society if we do not all speak out against this, you know? And it's not only about speaking out, it's about organizing programs. It's about doing something actively in communities. That's using your platform like this, having those hard talks. We don't want to have a hard talk. I had a hard talk about racism the other night. Hectic stuff, but it was needed. You know, I'm not one to pussyfoot around issues. We need to deal with issues directly. We need to call people out that is doing wrong things within society. That is the only way, because we will make it so unbearable for them that there's no place for them to hide. And that is what we want, ultimately. But then I also want to mention the issue, and I really think that it is important to mention. I have a personal belief that gender-based violence and gender inequality are linked. In fact, GBV is a consequence of gender inequality. And if we do not rid ourselves of this gender inequality on the social, on the economic, on the political fronts, we will always have gender-based violence. That is why we have the problem that we're facing today. So we need also at the same time to eradicate that problem. Not only talk to them about how to be a good man, it's about telling them, listen here, women are equal to you. They're not submissive. Treat them as equals, you know? And I think that is the conversation that we also need to have, you know, at some point.
Melene, I could still chat to you for a good couple of hours, but I've got one final question, and I think it's probably the most important question in this session is, how do we take the conversation forward? And you spoke about, you know, those people who are complicit, whether men or female. And one of the arguments I always hear is that they'll tell the victim, you'll ruin his life. How do we stop that? He abused you, but you're going to ruin his life. I don't get that. How do we take this forward?
Yeah. That's why I said, Jody, gender-based violence is a monster. And the kind of work that we, for example, do in communities is facilitate these community dialogues. So a lot of people at first, they won't speak about it. They'll just come and you know, hear out, what is this gender-based violence about? You know, what is the consequences? Because I also educate them about the law, national legislation, where I talk about punishments and all that kind of stuff. So they get a picture of how hectic the problem is. I still believe that it starts with education. You know, I mean, we can't teach people to have moral courage. It's either something that you have or you don't have, or you learn it over time. But that will take moral courage to confront people about it. And I've confronted many people and I've lost many friends because of the fact that you would confront people about not saying anything. But you still need to drive the narrative that gender-based violence is wrong. It should be eradicated. Everyone should speak out. And that we can't solve the problem if there's not a community buy-in. And we need the community to solve this problem. As much as we also want to blame law and the police and the court, we should also blame our community members. Because I always say, you know an abuser. You also know that lady that's being abused next door. You also know about your cousin that's being abused. But yet you say nothing. That is a problem, you see? Because these women feel that you know about my situation, but yet you're not reaching out to me. And imagine that. Now you're being abused at home. You know that your friends and your family know about the abuse, but they do nothing. You are left destitute and desperate for help. I don't think that there's any worse situation than that. But I would encourage these kinds of conversations. It's going to start with conversations in communities, in churches, because a lot of some of these practices, not gender-based violence necessarily, but sort of the, you know, the man is the head and the woman is the tail and X, Y, and Z. These kinds of ideas started to come out from churches, you know, and so we also need to deal with that beast. Yeah.
Now, like I said, we can still speak about it for hours, but thank you very much for your time, and keep on with the great work that you're doing. You're also on the shortlist for some other movement. Do you want to tell us a bit about that quickly?
Yeah, no, the closing date was yesterday, Jody, the 22nd of June.
My birthday.
Nominated. I was nominated for the top 20, the top 20 JCI Top Outstanding Young Persons of the World Award. So they're going to choose, out of the 20, they're going to choose the top 10. And the voting has closed yesterday. So let's hope for the best.
Holding down to you. Keep on with the good work. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Jody.
Great, man. Thank you.